Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
And, today's topic might sound a little, well, dry at first.
Yeah, a little bit.
We're going to be looking at the global market for gout therapeutics.
Right. Gout.
But stick with us,
Yeah.
because honestly, if you're interested in the bigger picture of how health trends evolve and how markets respond,
Yeah.
this is a really fascinating area to examine.
Yeah, it seems like a very niche medical market.
Yeah,
Actually gives us some really cool insights into global health trends and the pharmaceutical industry.
absolutely. So we've got this report.
Okay.
It's called the Global Gout Therapeutics Market Report 2025. It's by Cognitive Market Research.
Okay.
And this report really gives us like this in-depth look into where this specific market is headed.
Right, a forecast.
Yeah, forecast.
Okay.
And in this deep dive, we really want to sort of like distill down the key things for you.
Yeah.
The really important numbers.
Yeah.
Where the growth is happening.
Okay.
And most importantly, the reasons behind all of these trends.
Right.
We want to give you a clear and engaging understanding of what's going on here.
Absolutely. And I think by understanding these dynamics,
Yeah.
we can really see how lifestyle changes.
Right.
The prevalence of certain diseases
Yeah.
and how the pharmaceutical industry is adapting to meet those needs all kind of play together.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The report estimates that the global market for gout treatments is going to be around $270 million in 2025.
Okay.
And that's a big number already.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They're predicting that this market is going to expand significantly.
Right. A lot of growth.
Yeah, a lot of growth.
Okay.
By 2033, they expect it to reach $493.6 million.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is significant.
that's a huge jump.
Huge. Yeah.
And they're saying that the compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, is going to be 6.70% between 2025 and 2033.
Okay.
So for our listeners who might not be super familiar with financial terms,
Yeah.
can you explain what a 6.7% CAGR actually means for a market like this?
Yeah. So basically, it means that the market is predicted to grow by an average of 6.70% each year over that time period.
Okay.
And to see that kind of consistent growth over almost a decade
Yeah.
really tells us that there are some pretty big factors at play here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the main things that are driving this expansion?
So the report really highlights the fact that lifestyle-related diseases are becoming more and more common, and that's a major factor.
Okay.
More and more people globally are dealing with things like obesity, diabetes, and hypertension.
Right.
And we know that all of those things increase your chances of developing gout.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Exactly.
So if we're seeing more people with those conditions,
Yeah,
it makes sense that we would also see an increase in the number of gout cases.
absolutely. And it's not just about there being more cases.
Right.
There's also this growing awareness
Yeah.
that gout is a treatable condition.
Okay.
And there are more effective treatments available now.
So people are more likely to seek treatment and actually stick with their treatment plan.
Exactly.
And on top of that, we're seeing a lot of advancements in the actual treatments themselves.
Oh, absolutely. The
Yeah.
development of biologics and these new uric acid lowering therapies,
Yeah.
that's been huge for this market.
Right.
These newer treatments are often a lot more targeted in their approach,
Okay.
and that can lead to better results for patients.
So we've got a larger patient base.
Yeah.
And we have more effective treatments.
Right.
That gives us a pretty good understanding of why this whole market is on the rise.
Yeah.
Now let's look at how this market breaks down geographically.
Okay.
Which parts of the world are really dominating this market?
Sure. So right now, North America has the biggest share of the global market.
Okay.
They make up over 40% of the total revenue.
Wow.
And their market size in 2025 is predicted to be around $1,209.90 million US.
So they're the clear leader at this point.
Yeah, they are ahead.
What's their growth rate looking like, though, in the next few years?
So they're projected to have a TGR of 5.2% from 2025 to 2033.
A solid growth rate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And within North America, of course, we have the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
Right. The big players.
The big players.
Yeah.
And the report actually digs a little deeper into each of these countries.
Yeah, they do.
So what's the situation in the U.S.?
The United States is the biggest individual market within North America.
Okay.
They're estimated to be at $954.61 million US in 2025.
Okay.
And their projected CAGR is 5%.
Okay.
And the report points to a few things driving that.
Right.
Rising obesity rates,
Right.
dietary habits that can contribute to gout,
Yeah.
and the aging population, all those things factor in.
Yeah, it all kind of connects back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
Those
absolutely.
broader trends.
Right.
Okay, what about Canada?
So Canada's market is a little smaller. It's estimated at 145.19 million US dollars in 2025.
Okay.
But they actually have a slightly higher CGR of 6%. Yeah, and the report suggests that this stronger growth in Canada
Yeah.
is probably because they have better access to those more advanced treatment options.
Yeah.
And they have a really strong healthcare system overall.
So accessibility to good healthcare is a key factor there.
It seems to be.
And what about Mexico?
Mexico's market size in 2025 is estimated to be around 110.10 million US dollars.
Okay.
And they have a projected CAGR of 5.7%.
Got it. So it's interesting to see these little variations
Definitely.
within North America.
Yeah.
And the report also touches on why North America, especially the U.S., is so dominant in this market.
They do.
So what are their key advantages?
Well, North America has a really well-established pharmaceutical industry that's known for its innovation.
Okay.
And they invest a lot in research and development.
Right.
So they're really focused on creating these new and better treatments, especially in areas like biologics.
Yeah.
And they're even exploring cutting-edge approaches like RNA interference.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that gives them a big advantage in this market.
So it sounds like North America isn't just the biggest market.
Right.
It's also like a hub for developing the next generation of gout treatments.
Exactly. A lot of innovation happening there.
Okay, so let's move over to Europe now.
Okay.
What's the situation like across the Atlantic?
So Europe is the second biggest market for gout therapeutics globally.
Okay.
They make up over 30% of the total revenue.
Right.
And their market size in 2025 is estimated to be around 948.30 million US dollars.
So they're not far behind North America.
No, not too far behind.
And what about their growth rate?
So they're projected to grow at a CAGR of 5.8% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay.
Solid growth.
And of course, Europe is made up of many different countries.
Yeah, lots of different countries.
Each with their own healthcare system,
Right.
cultural factors, all that.
Uh-huh.
And the report gives us a breakdown of some of the key players in Europe.
It does.
So can you walk us through some of those numbers?
Sure. So the UK market is estimated at 159.31 million US dollars in 2025, with a CAGR of 6.6%.
Okay.
Germany
Yeah.
is at 187.76 million with a CAGR of 6%.
Okay.
And France is at 87.24 million with a CAGR of 5%.
Got it.
Then we have Russia at 146.99 million with a CAGR of 4.8%.
Okay.
Italy at 81.55 million with a CAGR of 5.2%.
Okay.
And Spain at 77.76 million with a CAGR of 4.9%.
So that gives us a good overview of those major economies in Europe
Yeah.
and their market sizes and growth rates.
Exactly.
But the report also gives us data for some of the smaller countries in Europe.
Yes, it does. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. So what are some of those numbers looking like?
Well, Sweden's market
Yeah.
is projected to be at 29.40 million with a CAGR of 5.9%.
Okay.
Switzerland is at 14.22 million with a CAGR of 5.4%.
Okay.
And even Luxembourg is at 11.38 million with a really notable CAGR of 6.1%.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the rest of Europe combined is at 132.76 million with a CAGR of 4.5%.
It's fascinating to see these individual growth rates
Yeah.
and market sizes all across Europe.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the variations.
So what are some of the big picture things that are driving this demand for gout therapeutics in Europe?
Well, I think a key factor in Europe
Yeah.
is that many countries have really well-established healthcare systems.
Right.
And often they have universal healthcare coverage. So
Right.
that usually means people have better access to diagnosis and treatment for conditions like gout.
Makes sense.
And that, in turn, fuels the demand for these therapies.
Okay, so the healthcare infrastructure and accessibility play a big role in Europe.
They do.
Okay, let's shift our focus now to the Asia-Pacific region.
Okay. APAC.
You know, that's a region known for its rapid economic growth.
Yes, it is.
So what's happening with the gout therapeutics market there?
Well, the Asia-Pacific region, or APAC,
Yeah.
currently holds a market share of around 23% of the global revenue.
Okay.
And their market size in 2025 is estimated at 784.80 million US dollars.
That's a pretty big chunk of the market.
It is.
And I remember seeing that APAC is expected to have a really high growth rate
Yes, that's right.
compared to other regions.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here?
They're actually expected to have the highest CAGR of all the regions
Wow.
at a really strong 9.4% from 2025 to 2033.
Wow, so that makes it a really dynamic and important market to watch.
Absolutely.
That's impressive growth.
Yeah.
Which countries within APAC are really leading the way?
So the biggest market in the region is China.
Okay.
It's estimated at $329.62 million in 2025,
Okay.
with a CAGR of 8.9%.
Okay.
Japan is next with 108.30 million and a CAGR of 7.9%.
Okay.
And then South Korea with 94.18 million and a CAGR of 8.5%.
Got it.
And India is another big market
Okay.
with 78.48 million dollars
Okay.
and a very strong CAGR of 11.3%.
Wow, double-digit growth in India.
Yeah.
That's really something.
It is.
So what are the main reasons behind these really high growth rates in APAC?
There are a few things going on. In China, chronic kidney disease is becoming more common, and that's a risk factor for gout.
Okay.
And that, combined with improvements in healthcare and more treatment options available,
Yeah.
that's driving a lot of the demand.
Makes sense.
And then in India,
Yeah.
the report points to changes in people's diets.
Okay.
They're consuming more high-purine foods, sugary drinks, and alcohol.
Right, so those lifestyle and dietary changes are really playing a big role.
They are, along with better access to healthcare.
Okay. Are there other notable markets within APAC?
Yeah, there are a few others.
Okay.
Australia has a market size of $40.81 million with a CAGR of 8.7%.
Okay.
Singapore is at 15.70 million with a remarkable CAGR of 9.7%.
Wow.
Taiwan is at 30.61 million with a strong CAGR of 9.2%.
Got it.
And the Southeast Asia subregion as a whole is at 51.80 million with an impressive CAGR of 10.2%.
Wow.
And then the rest of APAC accounts for $35.32 million with a CAGR of 9.2%.
So there's really strong growth across the whole APAC region.
It seems like it.
And the report even mentioned this specific thing about India,
Yes.
the impact of seafood exports on dietary habits,
Right.
which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Like this unexpected connection.
Yeah, so basically because India is exporting more seafood,
Yeah.
they're also seeing increased domestic consumption,
Okay.
which can lead to people eating more purines
Right.
and potentially increase their risk of gout.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, it's interesting. And on top of that, we're seeing rapid urbanization across the region.
Okay.
And that often leads to people eating more processed foods,
Right.
more meat, more alcohol.
Yeah.
All those things can contribute to gout.
Okay. So lots of factors at play there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we've covered the major regions now.
Yeah.
What about South America?
Okay.
How does their Gout Therapeutics market look?
So South America is a bit smaller,
Okay.
but it's still a significant part of the global market.
Okay.
They account for over 5% of the total revenue, and their market size in 2025 is estimated at $124.26 million.
And what's their projected growth rate?
They're expected to grow at a CAGR of 7.4% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay. And which countries are the big players in South America?
Well, Brazil is the largest market.
Okay.
It's estimated at $53.18 million in 2025,
Okay.
with a CAGR of 8%.
Okay.
Argentina follows with 20.88 million and a CAGR of 8.3%.
Okay.
Colombia is at 11.06 million with a CAGR of 7.2%.
Got it.
Peru is at 10.19 million with a CAGR of 7.6%.
Okay.
And Chile is at 8.95 million with a CAGR of 6.5%.
It seems like Brazil and Argentina are really showing some strong growth within South America.
Yeah, they are.
So what's driving that?
Well, the report says that economic growth in these countries, especially Brazil and Argentina, is leading to more investment in healthcare.
Right.
And treatments are becoming more affordable.
Okay.
So as more people have access to healthcare, we're likely to see more diagnosis and treatment of gout.
It makes sense.
And in Brazil specifically, the increasing rates of hypertension and diabetes are also a big factor.
Right. So economic development and increasing rates of other health problems would naturally lead to a growing need for gout treatments.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to the Middle East. What's the market like there?
So the Middle East has a smaller market share,
Okay.
around 2% of the global revenue.
Okay.
And their market size in 2025 is estimated at $130.80 million.
And what about growth?
They're projected to grow at a CAGR of 8% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay, so which countries are the main contributors to this market in the Middle East?
The biggest one is Saudi Arabia, with a market size of $46.04 million in 2025, and a CAGR of 8.3%.
Yep.
The UAE is next with 26.94 million and a CGR of 8.5%.
What?
Turkey is at 10.46 million with a strong CAGR of 8.6%.
Okay.
And Qatar is also at 10.46 million with a CGR of 7.5%. Then Egypt is at 7.85 million with a KGR of 7.8%.
Got it.
And the rest of the Middle East combined
Yeah.
is at 29.04 million with a KGR of 7.2%.
It looks like Turkey and the UAE have particularly strong growth projections there.
Yeah, they do.
What's driving the market in the Middle East in general, though?
I think a key factor in the Middle East is the rising number of people with chronic diseases.
Okay.
And along with that, there's this growing emphasis
Yeah.
on managing those diseases effectively,
Okay.
both by healthcare providers and governments.
Right. So it's becoming more of a priority.
Yeah, definitely.
And that includes conditions like gout.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this greater focus on healthcare and managing those chronic conditions
Yeah,
is boosting demand for these treatments.
it seems like it.
Okay, finally, let's take a look at Africa.
Okay.
What's happening there?
So right now, Africa actually has the smallest market share globally,
Okay.
around 1% of the total revenue.
Okay.
And their market size in 2025 is estimated at 71.94 million US dollars.
And what about their projected growth?
They're projected to grow at a CAGR of 7% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay, so which countries are the main markets in Africa?
Well, South Africa has the biggest market
Okay.
at 25.32 million US dollars in 2025
Okay.
and a KGR of 7.9%.
Got it.
Then Nigeria is at 5.76 million with a CAGR of 7.2%.
Okay.
And the rest of Africa combined
Yep.
is at 40.86 million with a CAGR of 6.2%.
So even though the market is smaller right now,
Yeah.
there's still some good growth expected.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's driving that growth in Africa?
Well, the report highlights that pharmaceutical companies are starting to see the potential of the African market,
Okay.
and they're expanding their presence there.
Right.
They're introducing more advanced gout therapies
Okay.
and improving their distribution networks.
So those treatments are becoming more accessible.
Yeah, that's a key factor driving the growth.
Makes sense.
And in Nigeria specifically,
Yeah.
changes in dietary habits
Yeah.
are also contributing to the rise in gout.
Right? So similar to what we're seeing in other regions.
Yeah, definitely those lifestyle factors.
Okay, so increased availability of treatments.
Yeah,
And these evolving lifestyles are really important in the African market.
absolutely.
Okay, so the report also breaks down the market based on the different types of drugs that are used to treat gout.
Right, different medications.
So what are the main categories we're looking at here?
The main types are NSAIs.
Okay, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs.
Yeah.
Okay,
Then there's colchicine,
Okay.
corticosteroids,
got it.
urate-lowering drugs,
Okay.
and biologics.
Okay, so how are these different segments performing in the market?
Well, the report suggests that NSAIDs are probably the most widely used right now.
Okay.
They're often the first choice
Yeah,
for managing those sudden gout attacks.
right, those flare-ups.
Yeah, because they're effective at quickly reducing pain and inflammation.
Yeah, they bring relief.
Yeah.
But the report also mentioned that one of these segments is growing really rapidly.
Yes, biologics is the fastest growing segment
Right.
within the gout therapeutics market.
So what's driving that rapid expansion?
Well, biologics,
Yeah.
which include things like monoclonal antibodies
Yeah.
and recombinant uricase enzymes,
Got it.
they offer a more targeted way to treat gout.
Okay.
Unlike those traditional drugs,
Yeah.
that might just reduce inflammation or uric acid in general.
Right.
Biologics can actually target specific molecules
Wow.
that are involved in the disease process.
Okay.
So, for example, some biologics target interleukin-1, which is a key driver of inflammation in gout,
Okay.
while others directly help break down uric acid.
Got it.
And this targeted approach can lead to better outcomes for patients.
Yeah, especially those who haven't responded well to those more conventional treatments.
Right.
It makes sense that a treatment designed to address the root cause of the problem
Yeah.
would be really appealing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The report also looks at how these drugs are actually getting to patients.
Yes. Distribution.
So what are the main channels that we're talking about here?
Well, the key channels are hospital pharmacies,
Okay.
retail pharmacies,
Right.
and increasingly online pharmacies.
Yeah, online is becoming more and more common.
Yeah, definitely.
So which of these channels is handling the largest volume of gout medications right now?
At the moment, hospital pharmacies have the biggest share of the market for
Okay.
distribution.
But are we seeing any shifts in how patients are getting these medications?
The retail pharmacy segment is growing really quickly,
Right.
and that suggests that more patients are managing their gout on an outpatient basis,
Yeah.
getting their prescriptions from their local pharmacy
Okay.
rather than just relying on hospital dispensaries.
So it's becoming more accessible and convenient,
Yeah, exactly.
which aligns with those broader trends in healthcare.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's zoom out again.
Okay.
Look at the big picture.
Right.
The report talks about some key market dynamics, the things that are driving growth and the things that might be holding it back.
Right. The push and pull.
Yeah, so we've already talked about some of those drivers,
We have.
like the rising number of people with gout,
Yeah.
the increasing obesity rates,
Uh-huh.
and all the research and development efforts.
Yeah.
But what about the things that might be slowing down this growth?
Well, the report says that the high cost
Okay,
of some of these treatments,
right?
especially those newer biologics,
Yeah,
that's a major factor.
okay.
These advanced medications can be
Yeah.
really expensive,
Right.
and that can make it difficult for some patients
Yeah.
and healthcare systems to access them.
Yeah, and it's also mentioned that the current treatments don't always work for everybody.
Right. Not 100% effective.
Yeah, so there's still a need for better, more innovative options.
Absolutely.
So cost and the limitations of the current treatments are still challenges.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, but what about emerging trends?
Okay.
What new directions are we seeing?
Well, the report points to a growing demand
Okay,
for those more advanced therapies,
Right.
especially biologics,
makes sense.
as patients and doctors look for more effective solutions.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing this trend towards personalized and precision medicine
Okay,
in gout treatment,
interesting.
which means tailoring those therapies
Yeah.
to each individual patient's needs
Okay.
and characteristics to get better results.
So more individualized and targeted treatment.
Exactly.
Makes sense. And the report also touches on the competitive landscape.
Yes.
All the companies that are involved in this market.
Right, all the players.
Yeah. So what's that looking like?
Well, the market's becoming more and more competitive.
Okay.
There are so many pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies,
Yeah.
both those big established names,
Right.
and these newer, more specialized firms.
Okay.
And they're all working to develop these novel and more effective gout treatments.
Okay.
So there's a lot of research and development going on, particularly focused on biologics
Yeah.
and also on developing biosimilars,
Okay.
which are basically more affordable versions of biologic drugs.
Okay.
And they're working on new formulations of existing medications.
So lots of innovation happening.
Yeah, it's really a dynamic field.
And a great example of this ongoing innovation is the collaboration
Right.
between Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals and Horizon Therapeutics on ARO-XDH.
Yes, that's a great example.
It sounds like it's a really exciting and rapidly evolving market.
It
There's
is.
lots of interesting developments on the horizon.
Absolutely.
So to sum it all up,
Okay.
our deep dive into this report has shown us that the global gout therapeutics market
Yeah.
is set for some serious growth,
Right.
and that growth is being driven primarily
Yeah.
by the increasing prevalence of lifestyle-related diseases
Right.
and these significant advances in treatment options.
Exactly.
And we're seeing some regional differences in that growth,
Yeah.
with the Asia-Pacific region expected to grow at the fastest pace.
Yeah, that's right.
And overall, there's this clear trend towards adopting those more advanced
Yeah.
and targeted therapies like biologics.
Absolutely. And the growing focus on personalized medicine
Yeah.
suggests that in the future,
Yeah.
gout treatment will become even more tailored to each individual patient's needs.
Right. It's all about that individual approach.
Yeah.
And for our listeners,
Yeah.
understanding these dynamics
Right.
gives you this valuable perspective,
Yeah.
not just on this one specific area of medicine,
Right.
but on the broader forces that are shaping healthcare and pharmaceutical innovation
Yeah, globally.
globally.
Absolutely.
It really shows how interconnected our health, our lifestyles,
Yeah.
and these advancements in medical science are
Yeah, on a global scale.
on a global scale.
Yeah.
So here's a final thought for you to consider. As personalized medicine continues to evolve,
Okay.
how might gout treatment become even more precisely tailored
Yeah.
to an individual's genetic makeup
Right.
and their specific disease characteristics? And what could that mean for both patient outcomes
Yeah.
and the future of this market?
Interesting question.
Or think about this, when we see that strong growth projected in regions like Asia Pacific and South America,
Yeah.
what does that tell us about the shifting global patterns
Right.
of those lifestyle-related diseases
Yeah.
and how different healthcare systems around the world
Yeah.
are adapting to address those growing needs.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to consider.
Thanks for joining us.